everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be looking at the history of the church and its focus on Judaism, Hebrew, Israel, Jerusalem, and just like how things have progressed within the church. This is something that I think is very unique to our church. It's clear that the Jews in Israel and Jerusalem have always been really important in the church. So there's a number of things that we're going to cover. I consolidated all of what I think are the most important events that took place since the church was formed when it comes to Judaism and the church. So, here's a picture of Orson Hyde as he dedicated the Holy Land for the return of the Jews, right? Everyone knows this story. And now there's actually Orson Hyde Memorial Gardens. In fact, let me pull it up on the map here. Orson Hyde Memorial Garden. That's in the Kidron Valley, just north of Gethsemane. Look, Gethsemane is right here, and Orson Hyde Memorial Garden is right there. Okay, and to give you perspective, here's the Dome of the Rock. This is the Temple Mount, right? The BYU Jerusalem Center is right here, right? So it's pretty incredible, the story. We're gonna get into that actually, but I tried to do this in chronological order, the best that I could. And the first thing, now I'm not going over the Book of Mormon itself. The Book of Mormon has a lot to do with the Jews and the return of the Jews to their land. But so I'm not going over that. But the first thing I was able to find, and I've known this for a while, is Joseph Smith's interest in Hebrew. Right, Joseph Smith, the first prophet of this dispensation, the one through which the church was restored. So this is on byu.edu. This is by Matthew J. Gray. The Word of the Lord in the Original. Joseph Smith's Study of Hebrew in Kirtland. Where's Kirtland? Kirtland is in Ohio, right? And this is actually, let's see, let me find it. The Kirtland Temple, Ohio. So for a time, this was the headquarters of the church. And the first temple constructed in this dispensation was in Kirtland. And here it is right here, the Kirtland Temple. Okay, so in this period, Joseph Smith established essentially a Hebrew school. So let's read about it. I'm going to zoom in so it's a little bit easier to read. As Samuel Brown and Richard Bushman have recently noted, Joseph Smith viewed ancient languages as a primary resource for accessing and communing with the sacred past. And of course, I've talked a lot of times on the channel about it's important to go back to the roots. Whatever your belief is, trace it back to where it comes from and make sure it's on solid ground, that it's attached to reality, primary sources, right? So when it comes to the scriptures, I think that's very important. Now, we've had a lot of this done for us by scholars that have been able to read these other languages and then give us insights and stuff like that. But I'm actually thinking myself, I'm not going to lie, I'm thinking about learning Hebrew. I want to. It's been something I've wanted to do for a long time. I may just do it. But anyway, Joseph Smith seemed to believe, along with many of his contemporaries, that biblical, classical, and other languages possessed keys for unlocking the earliest divine truths revealed to humanity. As such, his work with languages, encouraged by his earliest official titles of seer, translator, and prophet, see D&C section 21, verse 1, was a significant source of inspiration in his efforts to revive the, quote, ancient order of things. For Joseph Smith, interaction with ancient texts and languages took various forms, including supernatural translation projects, facilitated by seer stones and divine inspiration, academic attempts at reconstructing undeciphered scripts, such as his work with the Egyptian documents and Kinderhook plates, and studying biblical languages in the traditional manner. Within this third category, the most formal, well-documented, and influential exercise was Joseph's study of Hebrew in Kirtland, Ohio, between the fall of 1835 and the spring of 1836. Scholars of Mormon history and scripture have long known of Joseph's efforts to learn Hebrew and have observed numerous instances in which his Hebrew studies influenced his subsequent prophetic development. Over the last several decades, a small number of articles have provided valuable insights into various aspects of this topic, including the logistics of the Hebrew class in Kirtland. There was an actual Hebrew class. Okay, the personal background of Joshua Saxus, Joseph's Hebrew instructor, and Joseph's use of Hebrew in the Book of Abraham and the King Follett Discourse. To date, the fullest attempt at synthesizing this material is a study by Louis Zucker, Joseph Smith as a student of Hebrew, which has been the classic treatment of the topic for over 40 years. Okay, now I'm skipping down. I will focus particularly on Joseph Smith's formal study of Hebrew in Kirtland, which will include a consideration of the cultural context of Hebrew studies in early America, the motivations for Joseph and his associates to begin learning Hebrew in the fall of 1835, the content and methodology of their studies, and some concluding observations regarding the influence these studies had on Joseph's subsequent attempts to recover ancient texts, doctrines, and practices. So we're looking at 1835. This is only 5 years after the church was officially, what's it called? When the church was created in 1830, legally, in the state of New York. So, okay, we're going to skip all the way down here. Joseph Smith did not begin his Hebrew studies until the fall of 1835, but it is clear that he and his followers had an interest in the language from the beginning of the movement. So, when did the movement begin? 1820 with the first vision. So, sometime, probably near the late 20s, I most likely. I'm not like a very good historian when it comes to church history, but it probably wouldn't have been until those later years when he started to have more followers. This interest often reflected common views of Hebrew's religious significance, but it was also encouraged by Joseph's unique scriptural productions. The earliest revelations in the late 1820s to early 1830s, show that to Joseph and his associates, his prophetic authority was bound to his ability to uncover divine mysteries through his translation of ancient records. Many of his contemporaries also viewed languages as the key to unlocking the secrets of human origins, but Joseph's supernatural gift was to reveal these secrets despite his lack of linguistic training. The first such project was the translation of the Book of Mormon from gold plates, which attracted individuals who shared Joseph's interest in obtaining divine truth through the decipherment of ancient languages and who hoped to participate in his translation activities. Okay, skipping down. This section is called Joseph Smith's Motivations for Learning Hebrew. Once into his Hebrew studies, Joseph frequently expressed common Protestant sentiments that extolled the idea of reading the Bible in the original languages. Reading the Old Testament in Hebrew, he felt, would enable him to uncover the pristine teachings of the text and empower him to preach God's revelations. Quote, "Reading in our Hebrew Bibles, it seems as if the Lord opens our minds in a marvelous manner to understand His Word in the original language. And my prayer is that God will speedily endue us with a knowledge of all languages and tongues, that his servants may go forth for this last time to bind up the law and seal up the testimony. End quote. Similarly, a supplemental textbook published by the church for the use of the Hebrew school stated that the study of Hebrew would, quote, serve to facilitate the acquisition of a perfect knowledge of one of the best books, the Scriptures, the introduction of which was served to dispel darkness and disperse light into every clime, end quote. See, and this is why maybe it's a good idea for us to learn these languages, whether it's Greek, for the New Testament, or Hebrew, or whatever. I think it's a good idea. Okay, moving down. I don't know if I think there was one other thing I highlighted from here. Maybe not. No, maybe not. So this is a pretty lengthy article. I would recommend reading this. I'm probably going to read this myself in its entirety some other time. So this is kind of the beginnings before the church. It seems before the church was created, before it was established in 1830, there was an interest in Hebrew. Okay, now let's go to this story. Apostle Orson Hyde. Okay, first we're going to read kind of a simplified version, then we're going to read something that's a little bit more detailed. Okay, this is on the church website, history topics, dedication of the Holy Land. From his baptism into the church in 1831, okay, so 1 year after the church was established, Orson Hyde had hoped to someday fulfill a mission to Jerusalem. One night in 1840, he dreamed that he took a missionary journey through London, Amsterdam, and Constantinople, and finally ended in Jerusalem. Inspired by his dream, at the next church conference, he proposed undertaking a mission to the Jews. Fellow apostle John Page pledged support, citing Book of Mormon prophecies of the gathering of Israel and conversion of the Jews. Joseph Smith commissioned Hyde to represent the church to the priests, rulers, and elders of the Jews, quote unquote, in foreign lands. Hyde departed from Nauvoo, Illinois, 9 days later, and followed the path he had seen in his dream. Now, interestingly, Nauvoo, okay? We all know Nauvoo, but if you're new to the church or not a member of the church, Nauvoo is actually derived from a Hebrew word, okay? That's interesting. If you go to Britannica, it says here, this is, okay, Nauvoo, let's look at it on the map. Nauvoo Temple, let's just do that. So Nauvoo, Illinois is in the western part of the state. Here, let me go to this map. Okay, it's right along the border with Iowa on the Mississippi River. At one time, in the early days, it was actually larger than Chicago. But anyway, so that's kind of interesting. But here's Nauvoo. So after the Saints left Kirtland, Ohio, the next temple to be constructed was the Nauvoo Temple, which is right here. Let's go to the street view. And this is the first temple that was kind of like a temple like what we think today. The temples that we construct today, where we do ordinances, we do initiatories, endowments, and so forth, right? So for a while, Nauvoo was the headquarters of the church. And it's interesting that it has this Hebrew name. Now, I'm gonna get into that in just a minute. So the Mormons arrived in 1839, and their leader, Joseph Smith, renamed the settlement Nauvoo, a Hebrew word signifying beautiful place. Beautiful place. Here's a picture of the original temple, but we all know that it was destroyed after they left Nauvoo. It actually caught on fire and it was destroyed. But since that time, it's been reconstructed. Now, on this Fair Latter-day Saints article, they're apologists and scholars and stuff. This is interesting. This is something I didn't know before. It says Nauvoo is in fact a real Hebrew word. It appears in Isaiah 52:7 and Song of Solomon 1 verse 10. It is the Pillel form of the verb na'ah. In modern transliteration, we would write it as Nauvoo. It means to be comely. And what is comely? Comely is pleasant to look at, attractive. Okay. Joseph gave the word in the Sephardic transliteration system he learned from Joshua Saxus. In fact, the word Nauvoo is given in the Saxus grammar. See below. And remember, this is the instructor. So I guess he was a Sephardic Jew. That would be from, mostly from Spain, Portugal. So that's where he learned it, from him. The AU represents the vowel comets. The V is the letter waw, and the U or the O the OOU represents the vowel shurek. The following is a copy of a page from the Hebrew grammar that Joshua Saxus used to teach the language to Joseph Smith while at Kirtland. And here it shows in a red circle, Nauvoo, right? Nauvoo. That's how we pronounce it in English. Nauvoo. So, getting back to Orson Hyde, I think it's interesting that he left from a place that was called beautiful, pleasant to look at. What did it say in beautiful place? Right? Because a lot of times that kind of imagery is also associated with Jerusalem, and so anyway, I just find that interesting. Here's a picture of him. Okay. Page accompanied Hyde as far as Cincinnati, Ohio. Hyde then continued alone, reaching England in March 1841, where he assisted other members of the 12 for 4 months before traveling in a southeast direction across Europe. Along the way, Hyde sent letters to leaders of Jewish communities and stopped in major cities to preach to Jews. In October, he landed on the Palestinian coast, and when we say Palestinian, it's not like an acknowledgement that it's like that land belongs to Arabs or anything like that. That was like the common name at the time. Okay, so he landed on the Palestinian coast and proceeded inland to Jerusalem. He wept as he stood at the west gate and beheld the ancient city for the first time. Before sunrise on Sunday, October 24th, Hyde excited the city. Now, I looked this up, by the way, and this did not occur during any of the fall feast days. It actually happened after Sukkot, so it didn't happen on a significant Jewish date, but it's interesting that it was in that season, right? So before sunrise on Sunday, October 24th, Hyde exited the city, crossed the Kidron Valley, and ascended the Mount of Olives. There, he offered a prayer dedicating Jerusalem specifically, quote, for the gathering together of Judah's scattered remnants, end quote, and also more broadly, as a land of promise for all the scattered children of Abraham. After the prayer, he fashioned a stone altar to commemorate the occasion. Upon leaving Jerusalem, Hyde continued his mission by traveling back through Germany and then to London. He returned to Nauvoo in December 1842. So this is interesting because Israel became a nation in 1948. So this was about 100 years before, but it was in the 1800s that this movement started, where there was this idea that, maybe it's time to start thinking about going back to Israel and creating a nation. So it's very interesting. let's see. Yeah, let's continue reading. When Hyde and others had been set apart as members of the Quorum of the 12 in 1835, Joseph Smith informed them that only they had the authority to unlock the doors of the nations for the gathering of Israel. Hyde's apostolic dedication of the Holy Land helped fulfill this charge. The dedication was, however, different from other dedications of countries for Latter-day Saint missionary work. Hyde understood that this dedication would set in motion the gathering of God's ancient covenant people, the Jews, and would be a work that the Jewish people themselves would then carry out. Okay? So, not through missionary work. Because essentially what we have going on here is we have still, kind of to this day, the southern kingdom of Judah and then the northern kingdom of the so-called 10 lost tribes. And the church is primarily working with that. They're working with scattered Israel primarily from the 10 lost tribes. Although there are Jews occasionally that convert to the church. I've known a few. I think I've had a couple people comment on the channel that were Jewish. So that's what the church is currently working on. And so when we're talking about the gospel, because like in Christ's day, the gospel first went to the Jews. They had the first chance to receive it, and then it was taken to the Gentiles. Now it's being taken to the Gentiles. But when we're talking about Gentiles, we're talking about Gentiles in the traditional sense, but we're talking about a scattered Israel that is among the Gentile nations who have essentially spiritually become Gentiles. Um, you know, there's different ways that you can. We've read about this before, that there's different ways that you can use the term Gentiles. Like you could be, an Israelite, like a pure Israelite, but since you grew up or you're from a Gentile nation, in that sense, you're kind of viewed as a Gentile, even though you were actually Israelite. So, anyway, okay, so let's move on. So there's a separate thing going on with Judah, the kingdom of Judah, the Jews, separate. Okay, and this is part of Heavenly Father's plan. Between 1873 and 1933, several other dedicatory prayers for the Holy Land were offered by later apostles, and we're going to look at that in just a minute. In the 1970s and 80s, the church established a presence in the area around Jerusalem by creating a church district, establishing the Brigham Young University Jerusalem Center, and dedicating the Orson Hyde Memorial Garden on the Mount of Olives. In 1979, Elder Howard W. Hunter of the Quorum of the 12, who later on became the president of the church and the prophet, who had played an important role in establishing these Latter-day Saint institutions in the Holy Land, taught that the monument to Hyde's prayer did not mean, quote, that we favor only the aims of the Jews. The church has an interest in all of Abraham's descendants, end quote. He reminded his listeners that, quote, Jerusalem is sacred to Jews, but it is also sacred to Arabs, end quote. He concluded, quote, both the Jews and the Arabs are children of our Father. They are both children of promise, and as such, we do not take sides. We have love for and an interest in each. The purpose of the gospel of Jesus Christ is to bring about love, unity, brotherhood of the highest order, end quote. However, and he would agree with me, we know that the covenant, right, the birthright, the covenant, it comes down through Israel. So I've done videos about Islam and Muslims, and they are special. They are, because they are children of Abraham. And I just think that they have kind of like a different path that they're taking, and the Lord is working with them in his own way. So, and we also know that it was intended that the Jews themselves would come back to the land, right? And to Jerusalem. So, But again, the position of the church, we don't take a position when it comes to the politics and the conflict. Um, we know what's happening, but the Jews are supposed to be there. They're supposed to be there. Okay. Now, this is a really good talk. This is by David M. Whitchurch, Associate Professor of Ancient Scripture, BYU, given in 2016. It's called Orson, Hyde, the Holy Land, and Brigham Young University. Okay, so this is going to give us a little bit more detail. Okay, I know that some of it is repetitive, something that I don't mind. I know some of you do, but I like to read things over and over again because it helps solidify it in my memory. And I think it's good to go back over things. So, sorry. The Travels and Dedication of the Holy Land by Elder Orson Hyde. The church's connection with Jerusalem rightfully begins with the prophet Joseph Smith. So at the very beginning, in the very beginning of the church, while we often credit Orson Hyde for the church's involvement in the Holy Land, we should not overlook the role of the prophet. He certainly knew the historical and prophetic significance of the Holy Land. The word Jerusalem, for example, is used more than 900 times in the standard works. Add to that many stories and prophecies about the Holy Land, and we begin to get a sense of the significance of this geographically small corner of Heavenly Father's vineyard. Joseph Smith was well acquainted with the promises of God to bring his people back to the land of Jerusalem. Now look at this. As early as 1831, right after Hyde's baptism, Joseph Smith told Orson Hyde, quote, "Thou shalt go to Jerusalem and be a watchman unto the house of Israel, and by thy hands shall the Most High do a great work, which shall prepare the way and greatly facilitate the gathering together of that people." So, in other words, immediately after the church is established and formed in 1830, the year after, he tells Orson Hyde that he's going to be doing this and that the Jews need to return to their land. 4 years later, when Hyde was called to the apostleship in 1835, Oliver Cowdery, in the presence of Joseph Smith, blessed Hyde that, quote, he would be made mighty and be endued with powers from on high and go forth to the nations of the earth, both to Jew and Gentile, and to all nations, kingdoms, and tongues, end quote. During the 1836 dedication of the Kirtland Temple, and let's just look at that again. Okay, I'm doing this mostly for anyone that's not a member of the church, or just as a refresher, or if you're new to the church, or whatever. Kirtland Temple. Let's go there again. So here, we're in Kirtland. Okay, Kirtland Temple. During the 1836 dedication of the Kirtland Temple, Joseph prayed, quote, "We therefore ask thee to have mercy upon the children of Jacob, that Jerusalem from this hour may begin to be redeemed, and the yoke of bondage may begin to be broken off from the house of David." So this is during the dedicatory prayer of the Kirtland Temple, the first temple of this dispensation. Okay, so this happened before Orson Hyde went to Jerusalem, but so this is kind of like the first, I think, official prayer said for this to happen, right? Okay, moving on. Many of you are familiar with Orson Hyde's remarkable story about his mission to Jerusalem. Orson Hyde was called to serve in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles on February 14th, 1835. Oh, on Valentine's Day. In early March 1840, He was in Nauvoo, recovering from a serious ailment. He went to bed one night, but before falling asleep, he started thinking about, quote, the field of his future labors. Uh, and as a vision was opened before him, uh, For the next 6 hours, he did not close his eyes, as he saw, among other things, quote, the cities of London, Amsterdam, Constantinople, and Jerusalem, end quote. During the vision, Hyde was commanded to go to the cities he was shown. 1 month later, on April 6th, 1840, Elder Hyde spoke at General Conference. He said that, quote, it had been prophesied some years ago that he had a great work to perform among the Jews, and that he had recently been moved upon by the Spirit of the Lord to visit that people, end quote. When Hyde finished speaking, Joseph Smith motioned to those in attendance and resolved that Hyde should proceed on a mission to Jerusalem. Elder John E. Page, also a member of the 12, then got up and, quote, spoke with much force on the subject of Elder Hyde's mission, the gathering of the Jews, and the restoration of the house of Israel, end quote. On the last day of the conference, Joseph Smith, quote, stated that since Elder Hyde had been appointed to visit the Jews, he had felt an impression that it would be well for Elder John E. Page to accompany him on his mission, end quote. Elder Hyde left Nauvoo about a week later on Wednesday, April 15th, 1840. All right. Hyde endured many hardships through his travels. One of the more difficult legs of Hyde's journey came while traveling from Smyrna, modern-day Izmir, Turkey, to Beirut, Lebanon, when his ship was becalmed. With little to no wind to move his ship forward, it took 19 days to arrive at his destination instead of the anticipated 4. Yeah, that's a big difference. That's the better part of a month. He ran out of food and resorted to eating snails to sustain his life, of which he said, quote, the greatest difficulty was I could not get enough of them. When he finally arrived in Lebanon, he was so weak that he did not have the energy to get off the ship. Upon his arrival in Beirut, he found the country at war, in which 800 people had recently been killed not far from Beirut. In addition, he described a horrific state of lawlessness, murder, and theft going on about him while traveling through the Levant. Finally, he arrived in Jaffa to make the 40-mile trek overland to Jerusalem. 3 days later, on October 24th, 1841, Hyde got up early in the morning to fulfill the long-awaited mission he had come to Jerusalem to do. And again, here's the picture. Which is interesting because here he's looking pretty thin compared to here where he's not so thin. Although this is probably after he left. I don't know, but he probably lost a lot of weight going on this journey. He wrote of the occasion, quote, as soon as the gates of the old city were opened, I crossed the brook Cedron and went up to the Mount of Olives, and there, in solemn silence, with pen, ink, and paper, just as I saw in the vision, offered up the following prayer to him who lives forever and ever. And then here it says, here are only small portions of the prayer. Yeah, you can read the whole prayer. I'm not going to do that because it's a little bit long, but okay. So here's some parts of the prayer. Be pleased, O Lord, to forgive all the follies, weaknesses, vanities, and sins of thy servant, and strengthen him to resist all future temptations. Now, O Lord, thy servant has been obedient to the heavenly vision which thou gavest him in his native land, and under the shadow of thine outstretched arm. He has safely arrived in this place to dedicate and consecrate this land unto thee, for the gathering together of Judah's scattered remnants, according to the predictions of the holy prophets. Let that nation or that people who shall take an active part in behalf of Abraham's children, and in the raising up of Jerusalem find favor in thy sight. And that has been the case. That has been the case. You have the examples of the United Kingdom as well as the United States, and we have definitely, I think, in the world have had favor among others. Okay, it was over a year before Elder Hyde returned to America. He traveled back by way of Regensburg, where he spent a number of months working on a church publication in German. He finally arrived in Nauvoo on December 7th, 1842. Oh, just in time for Christmas. Gone for a few months, shy of 3 years, he arrived home to his wife and 2 daughters. What a reunion that must have been. Okay. The beautification and dedication of the Orson Hyde Memorial Gardens. Hyde was not the only Latter-day Saint to travel to Jerusalem. Between 1873 and 1833, other presiding authorities of the church came to the Holy Land to offer up their prayers unto God. You may recognize from your studies of church history some of the names of those who traveled there. Albert Carrington, I don't know who that is, Lorenzo Snow, and he was later a prophet of the church, or president of the church, prophet. George Albert Smith, also. Anthony H. Lund, no. Francis M. Lyman, no. James E. Talmage, yes. He was an apostle, I believe. Yeah, he was an apostle. Of course he was. And John A. Widsoe. All of these men, okay, here you go. All these men were either members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles or the First Presidency, and all traveled to the Holy Land to offer up special prayers blessing that sacred land. Now, this is something that I did not know. I thought that it was only Orson Hyde, but there were others, including a couple prophets. Lorenzo Snow, George Albert Smith, prophets. So I found this interesting article. This is in the Scholar Archive, BYU, and here's like a little chart, a table, showing you the different people and the types of blessings that they gave. So you have Orson Hyde right here. After that, you have Carrington, Snow, Smith, Lund, Lyman, Talmage, Widsoe. All of them blessed / dedicated the land. All of them except for 1, 2, 3 times. All these times other than 3 was for Israel / Jews to gather. And then we have welfare of the church, which was done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Missionaries, the last 3 times, and then 1 other time. Prophecies fulfilled, confound enemies, which I think that's interesting, confound enemies, because Israel has had remarkable political and military success against its enemies. And you have to wonder if that was as a result or in part because of these dedicatory prayers, right? Soften hearts, and then rebuild Jerusalem. Rebuild Jerusalem was said by Orson Hyde, George Albert Smith, and Lyman. So anyway, here's this chart. There was a lot more in this, but because it's a PDF, I can't highlight. So I might have to save this one for another day. But look at this. I mean, look at all these times. You have 1841, 73, 98, 1902, 27, and 33. And you have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different dedications and prayers. Whereas before now, I thought there was only the one. So this is fascinating. They all took place before Israel became a nation in 1948. So it's incredible. Okay. Latter-day Saints continued traveling to the Middle East in the decades that followed. Elder Spencer W. Kimball, who later became president of the church as well, visited in 1961. That April, his entire General Conference address was about his trip to the Holy Land. It wasn't long before the BYU Department of Travel Study made a proposal to the BYU Board of Trustees asking them to approve a program in Jerusalem. The matter was referred to the First Presidency. President David O. McKay approved the request with a provision that the program be balanced between time in Arab territory and time in Jewish territory. That proviso continues to this day. In 1968, under the direction of Daniel H. Ludlow, Dean of Religious Education, 20 students and 2 faculty members inaugurated the Jerusalem Study Abroad program. Throughout the following years, church leaders continued coming to the Holy Land, and Eldon Tanner, Hugh B. Brown, Harold B. Lee, which later became a prophet, Gordon B. Hinckley, also, Howard W. Hunter, also, Neil A. Maxwell, which was an apostle, and James E. Faust, which was an apostle and also a member of the First Presidency. With an expanding church presence, the mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek, was introduced to members of the church. During the mid-1970s, he contacted church leaders in Salt Lake City to see if they were interested in developing a 5-acre property on the Mount of Olives. He recommended it be named after Orson Hyde. President Kimball took immediate action. The needed funds were raised through donations, and the garden was dedicated by President Kimball on October 24th, 1979. 6 apostles also attended the dedication, along with nearly 2,000 members of the church. That's a lot. So half of the Quorum of the 12, 2,000 members, President Kimball. And it's interesting that the mayor was the one that contacted the church to develop it. Yeah, it says he contacted church leaders to develop it. All right. The construction and dedication of the BYU Jerusalem Center for Near East Studies. A search for property for BYU was approved as the Jerusalem Study Abroad program continued to grow. Okay, now, before we get into this, I've gone over this before in a different video, but there was a miracle that took place that allowed the BYU Jerusalem Center to become a reality. And I'm going to show you that right now. So we're going to put a bookmark right here at this part, and we're going to hop over here. This is in latterdaysaintmag.com. This is by Mark Albright, September 24th, 2012. The first time I heard this story was actually when I was in college in Institute, and this blew me away. This just absolutely blew me away. Okay, so this is one of the main things that made the BYU Jerusalem Center a reality. So I'm going to move this tab over here. Okay. With so much unrest recently in the Middle East, it may be hard for some to believe that years ago, LDS missionaries actively proselyted in the region. Now, this is before the agreement between the church and the government not to do any proselyting. So this was before Israel was even a state yet. Okay. This is the true story of one of those rare missionaries. Elder John Alexander Clark was born February 29th, 1871. So Utah was not even a state yet. Utah became a state in 1896. The 5th child in a family of 10 to Ezra Thompson Clark and Susan Leggett Clark in Farmington, Utah. By the time he was 23, he was teaching school in Minersville, Utah, but he felt impressed that he needed to serve a mission. When his mission call finally arrived, he was surprised to read that he would be serving in Palestine. His parents worried about his being called to serve in such a remote part of the world and begged him not to go, but John firmly believed that the Lord had a special purpose in sending him to the Holy Land, and he was determined to serve where he was called by the Lord. When he arrived in the Turkey mission, so it wasn't the Palestine mission, it was actually the Turkey mission via England and Germany. So when he arrived in the Turkey mission, he was eventually assigned by his mission president to work in Haifa, about an hour north of Jerusalem. Let's take a look on the map where that is. Haifa, Israel. Okay, so it looks like it's on the coast. It is northwest of Nazareth. It doesn't look like it's really too far. It's directly west of the Sea of Galilee. So here's Haifa. Okay, this is where he was. Okay, skipping down. Unfortunately, Elder Clark soon thereafter entered a home where the family members were sick with a contagious disease, and he contracted smallpox. He died several days later at the age of 24 in Palestine. Because of the dreaded nature of the disease, he was quickly buried in a cemetery at the base of Mount Carmel, Palestine, and his personal belongings burned. Okay, where's Mount Carmel? I definitely recognize that name. Mount Carmel, Israel. Yeah, where is it? Oh, it's like right nearby. It's just like right over here. Is there a cemetery? Cemetery. Okay. So he was buried at the base of Mount Carmel in a cemetery, and his personal belongings burned. From the book entitled Ezra Thompson Clark's Ancestors and Descendants, we read, quote, John Alexander Clark died in Haifa, Palestine, February 8th, 1895. He was teaching school in Minersville, Utah, when he was called to a mission to Turkey. He landed in Liverpool in February, met his co-workers in Leipzig, Germany, and in the summer started to work among the German population of Beirut, Syria, which is 80 miles north of Haifa, while starting to study Arabic. In August, he went to Haifa, where he started to work among the Arabs. He contracted smallpox and was buried in a cemetery at the foot of Mount Carmel, Palestine. Page 120. Elder Clark's death was a great shock to the members of his family. He died while working in the Muslim area of Haifa, Palestine. Up until his death, Elder Clark was cared for by brother and sister Hilda, or Hild, I don't know, Hild, I don't know, and other kind friends. Interestingly, in the tithing records that the Haifa branch had at the time, so there was a branch there. There is a record giving Elder Clark credit for paying 10 francs of tithing on January 18th, 1895. Still later, on January 26th, his name appears again as a tithe payer just 13 days before his death. Sadly, just 3 years earlier, so before him, 3 years earlier, Elder Adolf Hogg of Stuttgart, Germany, died August 3rd, 1892. Of typhus. Elder Hogg was also buried in Haifa, Palestine, now Israel. The two graves of these missionaries are located near each other in the same cemetery. So this German elder from 3 years before died of typhus, and then Elder Clark died of smallpox, and both of them, 3 years apart, buried in the same cemetery. Okay, so things are getting kind of interesting here. Other than beloved family members, most members of the church would probably not know of Elder John Alexander Clark and Elder Adolf Hogg. But for some interesting developments which occurred in the Holy Land in the mid-1970s. David B. Galbraith, a BYU professor, was appointed in 1972 as the resident director of BYU's study abroad program in Israel. He was also called that same year to serve as the first branch president of the church in Jerusalem. In these assignments, he oversaw the experience of thousands of students who came to the Holy Land through BYU, right? Because of the study abroad program in Israel that we were just talking about in this other talk. In the mid-1970s, the church determined that it should seek formal recognition by the government of Israel as a church legal entity with certain legal rights, including the right to be a landowner and to have certain banking privileges to deal with large sums of money. Okay, so they were seeking for this formal recognition of the government. The church was interested in acquiring some land for the construction of the BYU Jerusalem Center and needed to obtain this formal recognition. There were only five old. Okay, well, what? There were only 5 old non-Jewish religions that were recognized in Israel at the time: the Roman Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, Armani, Baha'i, and the Anglican Church. These entities were, of course, not interested in having a new upstart Christian religion, particularly one from America, working their way into this elite group. The Baptists and others had already tried and failed previously. The church's local attorney in Israel explained that the church would likely never attain to the status of the original 5, whose presence predated the state of Israel, unless the church could show a similar official presence existing in the Holy Land dating back before Israel's establishment in the year 1948. So, in some way, the church had to show that they had a presence before 1948, okay, in order to get this status, this formal recognition. The church's efforts to construct a building for Near Eastern studies in the Holy Land were met with great resistance. I think that this is mostly because of misunderstanding. The church, I'm sure among them, they already knew that we were like a big proselyting church. So I don't think it was ever because they didn't like us necessarily, but they were just worried about the proselyting. So the Jewish leaders argued that the LDS Church should not be allowed to construct a building on the selected site when it had never had a presence in the Holy Land previously. It seemed as if nobody wanted the church to be established in Jerusalem. But then an important miracle occurred. It was discovered that 2 Mormon missionaries were buried in a cemetery in Haifa. They had died while establishing the LDS Church in the Holy Land some 90 years earlier, in 1892 and 1895, respectively. The inscription on Elder Clark's headstone made it very clear who he represented. Quote, in fond memory, or in fond remembrance of John A. Clark, son of Ezra and Susanna Clark, born February 28, 1871, at Farmington, Utah, USA, died February 8, 1895, at Haifa, Palestine, a missionary of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Elder Hogg's inscription on his nearby tombstone said essentially the same thing, but in German. Although there had also been a mission home in Haifa before the establishment of the State of Israel, the real property records did not indicate that it had been purchased outright by the church. Professor David Galbraith points out in his article entitled "The Jerusalem Center for Near Eastern Studies: Reflections of a Modern Pioneer," the Religious Educator, Volume 9, Number 1, 2008, quote, "Even though the street and the very building could be located, there was no evidence of any documents that the church had owned the land outright," end quote. Nevertheless, based significantly on the fact that the church's 2 missionaries' headstones confirmed the existence of the church in the Holy Land in the 1890s, the Articles of Association sailed right through the complex approval process without complication. So, their deaths made this possible. And I have a playlist that is all about the BYU Jerusalem Center. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the BYU Jerusalem Center. I'll put this in the description below so you can check out the playlist. But I think that I think the BYU Jerusalem Center is very important for many different reasons. Um, for many different reasons. I don't think that they died just so that some people could go to, be part of the Near Eastern Studies program and, just have a hands-on feel by going to Jerusalem. I think that it's more than that. Um, anyway, let's see. Although the church did not acquire the same exact legal status as the original 5 churches, the church had miraculously satisfied the requirements of Israeli law for a modern association as a legal entity. This meant that it had all the legal rights associated under Israel law, which included the right to own land and conduct banking business. The Articles of Association were approved on June 16th, 1977. Later, another Israeli attorney, Joseph Kokia, was retained to successfully guide BYU through the same political minefield in establishing its own legal status in Israel. So it looks like it did obtain that status. It now became clear that one of the important purposes of the Lord in sending these 2 young men on missions to Palestine was to assist in establishing the church in the Holy Land a century later. They had not died in vain. Okay, so a pretty amazing story, I'd say. Okay, so a search for property for BYU was approved as the Jerusalem Study Abroad program continued to grow. Elder Howard W. Hunter, again, he would later become president, made 6 trips to the Holy Land in 1979. The day before the Orson Hyde Memorial Garden dedication, President N. Eldon Tanner went to see some 26 possible land sites. 26. From those, he selected 7 or 8. From those, he selected 7 or 8 to show President Kimball, who was the prophet at the time. The eventual site of the center on Mount Scopus was not on the list. So out of all those 26 possible sites and the 7 or 8 that he had narrowed down, where the BYU Jerusalem Center ended up was not out of any of those. This is interesting. The story is told that a party of 12 people went to look at potential properties. The group included Spencer W. Kimball, the prophet, and Eldon Tanner, their wives, 6 members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and others. The last stop of the day was a site slightly south and east of where the current Jerusalem Center building is now located. At some point, President Kimball broke off from the others and began to walk northward along the hillside, looking down toward the Kidron Valley. After he had walked 100 yards or so to a spot overlooking an empty field, he stopped and said, "This is the place." Where have we heard that before? This is the place. Brigham Young in Utah, when he saw Ensign Peak in the Salt Lake Valley, he said, "This is the place." And now we have President Kimball having a similar experience. I'm wanting to do a video about locations, sacred locations, because I really do think, and I don't know exactly why, but I do think that there are pre-designated sacred spots on the earth where the Lord wants things to be built. And I want to do a video exploring maybe some of the reasons why. Some of the reasons why we may not know until after this life or in the millennium. One thing that's interesting is, and this has been noted before by many, that Israel is kind of at the crossroads. So, for example, Israel itself. It's at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe, right? It's like basically right in the middle. So it would make sense that the Lord already knowing, how world history would go and everything, that he wanted Israel to be here um, at this important crossroads. We know that Salt Lake was selected by the Lord. We know that, um, excuse me, that it was seen in that Ensign Peak was seen in vision to help identify the place where the saints should settle. We know over here in Kansas City, here it is, Kansas City, specifically in the suburb of Independence, that this is the center place of the New Jerusalem, which is not constructed yet, but it will be at some point in this area. So anyway, I want to do a video maybe exploring that a little bit more. But anyway, this is the place, says President Kimball, for the BYU Jerusalem Center. President Tanner, who had been following close behind and was accompanied by the other members of the party, then said, "All in favor, raise your hand." When a prophet asks you to raise your hand, it is hard to refuse. Suffice it to say that the land President Kimball chose was not for sale. It was disputed land located on property designated as green space. The acquisition of the property and the subsequent building of the Jerusalem Center is, in its own right, miraculous as were Elder Hyde's travels to dedicate the Holy Land. And then I would add on top of the story of these two missionaries from the 1800s that made way for this to even happen. A lot of miracles. The project would come directly under the office of the first presidency, with the university as the chief beneficiary. The first presidency appointed Elder Howard W. Hunter, assisted by Elder James E. Faust, to represent the church in this building project. The Executive Oversight Committee was chaired by BYU President Jeffrey R. Holland, he's now an apostle. Many others, too many to name, played significant roles in the successful completion of the Jerusalem Center. So you have to think, you guys, that there may be great significance to the BYU Jerusalem Center. I've proposed the idea, and many others have too, that this could, in the future, and not illegally, not sneakily, become the temple or a temple in the future. Probably not till like the millennium, and again, it would never be done against Israeli law, but the Lord can make things happen and things can change in the future. We know that there's a lot that's going to happen in the lead up to the second coming and after the second coming. Here it is right here. Here's the BYU Jerusalem Center. Again, I would encourage you to watch that playlist. It is fascinating. It is nothing short of fascinating, that playlist. But anyway, here it is right here. You can see it has a good view of the Temple Mount. In fact, let's see if let's go to this. Oh, this is inside. This is that main auditorium. But look right there. You can see the Dome of the Rock sitting in this auditorium. I hope I get to visit this someday. This is such a beautiful building. I love it. I love it so much. I would love to look at this incredible view. Jerusalem at night. Sitting in this nice auditorium thing here. And then it has like kind of like a cool organ up here with like these kind of crazy looking pipes that look like trumpets. Probably intended to look like that. I'm sure there's a story behind that. Okay, let's go back. One whom I will mention is Robert P. Robert P. Thorne. Brother Thorne, who had considerable real estate experience, was asked by the church if he would go to Jerusalem to oversee the acquisition of the property on Mount Scopus. Uh, by the way, Mount Scopus is part of the same ridge, mountain ridge, as the Mount of Olives, but it's a separate mount, right? He anticipated being there for a few weeks. It turned out that navigating and getting approval from various politicians and numerous agencies kept him there for 1.5 years. So it wasn't quite just a few weeks. Construction on the Jerusalem Center started in August 1984 and continued nonstop until 1988. An effort to halt the project began as soon as construction on Mount Scopus began, and people found out that the Mormons were the ones doing the building. The Haredi Jewish community, a sect of Orthodox Judaism, they're the ones I refer to them quite a bit. Sometimes they are referred to as like ultra Orthodox, but so Adam Berkowitz, the one that I interviewed, he is not Haredi, but he is Orthodox. Anyway, a sect of Orthodox Judaism feared that the center would provide a foothold for the church to do missionary activities in the Holy Land. Every sort of pressure possible was brought to bear against the church and the university. It became an international news item. The Knesset and that's the legislative body. The Knesset and various government officials and offices were involved. Israelis took both sides of the issue, some supporting cultural and religious diversity, and others seeing Mormon proselyting and conversion of any Jew as a loss of Jewish identity. The impact of the Jerusalem Center had been profound. When the Jerusalem Center was finished, Jeffrey R. Holland, at the time president of BYU, took Mayor Kolek on a tour of the building. Mayor Kolek hardly said anything until the end of the tour, when he said, "You have taken the most beautiful piece of property we could have given you, and have done more with it than I thought possible. I consider it the most beautiful building built in Jerusalem in recent years." And it is a beautiful building. Let's see, BYU Jerusalem Center. We've looked at like the architecture of it, specifically. Okay, let's look at this Deseret News article. We've taken a look at the architecture, specifically this kind of like arcade. The main feature of it are these arcades. An arcade is a series of arches. That in itself is very interesting, and we covered that pretty in depth in the playlist because I think that's on purpose. In fact, there are 12. Oh my gosh, this always happens when I do longer videos. I start to fall apart at the end. There are oh my gosh. There are 12 pillars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Which obviously there's probably some intentional symbolism there. Down here you have the dorms, which I think it would be so cool to stay there, be in the dorms. But it is a beautiful building. It is a beautiful building. I don't know if there was anything else here. No, there's nothing else here in this article or in this talk. Sorry, everybody. Okay, this is from The New Era, 1979, April. Orson Hyde, Olive Branch of Israel. Tired and weary after several months' travel of nearly 10,000 miles, Orson's enthusiasm was revitalized as he finally arrived at the sacred city of Jerusalem. Here he carefully walked along a dark, narrow street, avoiding the heavily loaded camels that traveled toward him. In the early morning hour, he passed through the ancient gate in the old decayed wall near the brook Kidron. As Orson crossed over the small brook and climbed up the gentle slope of the hill, bright rays of sunshine encompassed the Mount of Olives. It was a magnificent sight as he gazed upon the surrounding countryside from the top of the mount. There, alone, on Sunday, October 24th, 1841, Orson wrote and offered the prayer dedicating Palestine for the return of the Jews and for the building of the temple in the future. For the first time in 1800 years, an apostle stood again on the Mount of Olives. After his prayer, Orson Hyde built 2 stone altars, patterned after those of ancient Israel, for memorials. The first memorial was on the Mount of Olives, and the second on Mount Moriah. And Mount Moriah is the Temple Mount. Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah in Old City, Jerusalem is the site of numerous biblical acts of faith. It is also the most valuable piece of real estate. Anyway, sorry, I just needed to confirm that that's what... I knew it. Sometimes I double guess myself. Sorry, this is out of order. This should have been earlier in the video. But he built 2 altars. 2 altars in Jerusalem. One on the Mount of Olives, one on Mount Moriah. That's really cool. That's really cool. Okay, I want to read a little bit about when the Orson Hyde Memorial Garden was dedicated. President Kimball dedicates Orson Hyde Memorial Garden in Jerusalem. So it's interesting because President Kimball, he's the one that chose the spot for the BYU Jerusalem Center, and he dedicated the Memorial Garden. Okay. Now, if you want to see what it looks like there, I found this YouTube video that, excuse me, that somebody took. This is by Zahi Shaked, Israeli tour guide, and he does a little video here at the Memorial Garden, and you have this stone thing with an inscription in it in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. And it says, the Jerusalem National Park, Orson Hyde Memorial Garden, donated by the Orson Hyde Foundation, Salt Lake City, Utah, through the Jerusalem Foundation. Okay. On a revered hill outside a revered city, President Spencer W. Kimball, October 24th, dedicated a garden built in memory of an apostle's prayer. President Kimball told those attending that much of Elder Hyde's prayer has been fulfilled. Quote, the land has become abundantly fruitful again, with flocks and orchards and fields. The scattered children of Abraham have returned in great numbers to build up this land as a refuge, and the city of Jerusalem has flourished, he said. President Kimball was one of 3 church leaders given a medal of the city of Jerusalem by Mayor Kolek. Also receiving medals were Elder Richards and Elder Hunter. That would be Howard W. Hunter, which later became president of the church. Church leaders gave Mayor Kolek a porcelain statue of Noah holding a peace dove. Now the mayor, okay, well I should have highlighted this. Mayor Kolek spoke of the Orson Hyde Foundation's contribution to the beautification of Jerusalem and joked, we'll come to you with another project soon. He demonstrated his awareness of Latter-day Saint teachings when he quipped, quote, we are very grateful that all of you made the effort to come to the other Jerusalem, end quote, referring to the church teaching of a new Jerusalem to be built on the American continent. Quote, everybody who knows about the history of Jerusalem is in comparatively modern times knows about the prophecy of Orson Hyde, Mayor Kolek said. Which is that's interesting. Now, this is back in 1979, but I find that interesting. At the dedication of the gardens, Mayor Kolick added, quote, "I wish you all could continue as many generations as we have continued, and that this good relationship between you and us should persist during all these coming centuries. We are looking forward to it," he said, his remarks bringing applause from the audience. "And together we'll make okay, quote, and together we'll make both Jerusalems very beautiful, and you'll help us in doing so." That's a really cool thing for the mayor of Jerusalem to say. He's he's respecting our belief in having the new Jerusalem here, in the Americas, in Independence, Missouri. That's really cool. Transcript. Elder Jeffrey R. Holland on the 175th anniversary of Orson Hyde's historic journey. This is short, but I'm going to read it. Okay. This is in 2016. So at this point, he is Elder Jeffrey R. Holland. He's the apostle, but he is the one that was the president of BYU. He says, "Dear friends, in the midst of all this discussion about Orson Hyde's prayer, the presence of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Israel, and some history about this magnificent Brigham Young University Center, it strikes me that we may need just a little more context for all of this. Someone of you may be asking, what prompted all of this Orson Hyde stuff anyway? Let me try to say a word in that regard to provide a backdrop to all you are seeing and hearing. You know better than I the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the posterity which did not, it turned out, preclude the scattering and dispersion of that posterity, sifted, quote, like a corn is sifted in a sieve. The prophet Amos described it, fulfilling what Moses had recorded in the Torah. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you. But equally prophesied was that ancient Israel would be gathered, as the prophet Ezekiel wrote, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side, and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel. So shall they be my people, and I will be their God. Note this prophecy in the Book of Mormon, our sacred record, which is Semitic in its origin. And I will remember the covenant which I have made my people, and I have covenanted with them that I would gather them together in mine own due time, that I would give unto them again the land of their fathers for their inheritance, which is the land of Jerusalem, which is the promised land unto them forever, saith the Father. Then shall they break forth in joy, sing together, ye waste places of Jerusalem, for the Father hath comforted his people, he hath redeemed Jerusalem. All of this, minus the Book of Mormon material, you know far better than I. But I mentioned it to provide historical context for something not as well known. That is that one of the foundational pieces of LDS theology is that we of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints represent a remnant of the tribe of Joseph, with our patriarchal lines going back principally to Ephraim and Manasseh, and that in such a covenantal relationship, modern prophets have played a role in the gathering of Jews to their homeland. In 1820, a 14-year-old boy named Joseph Smith prayed to know that what God would have him do, and had a divine manifestation instructing him, among other things, that it was soon time for the scriptural promises given to ancient Israel to be fulfilled, in that he, Joseph Smith Jr., would be instrumental in restoring the priesthood and powers that would bring to fruition those prophecies. Following the dedication of the first Latter-day Saint temple built in the tradition of, but not with the luxury of the Temple of Solomon, the young prophet Joseph Smith, by then 30 years of age, was visited by a series of Old Testament prophets who appeared and initiated the fulfillment of many of the promises we have been referring to today. One visitor was the prophet Elijah in fulfillment of ancient promise recorded by Malachi. Excuse me. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he will turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. We know that it is a cherished Jewish tradition to leave an empty chair for Elijah at Passover. We feel we understand that tradition better than any non-Jewish group in the world because part of our history involves the return of Elijah in the filling of that empty chair. Furthermore, Elijah's return is crucial to Latter-day Saint theology, giving meaning to the 152 temples we have built around the world, with many more to come. In those temples, quote, the hearts of the fathers are turned to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers. That leads me to another visitor received by the 30-year-old Joseph Smith on that same occasion, the prophet Moses. Of this manifestation, the young prophet wrote, quote, the heavens were again opened unto us, and Moses appeared before us, and committed unto us the keys of the gathering of Israel from the four parts of the earth, and the leading of the 10 tribes from the land of the north. End quote. That world-changing appearance of Moses, father of Israel's first return to the promised homeland, initiated a latter-day return that would, according to the prophet Jeremiah, transcend in significance that earlier escape from Egypt. As Dr. Curl has explained, Orson Hyde's 1841 mission to Jerusalem to dedicate this land for the return of the Jews and for Jerusalem to be its capital city was an important moment in the latter-day Jewish return to their homeland, coming nearly 50 years before Theodore Herzl's rise to prominence and 80 years before the Balfour Declaration. So, okay, I'm going to stop here because there's some interesting things said here. That for the Jews, Jerusalem would be its capital city. And again, the church does not insert itself or take a political position when it comes to the contention in the land right now over land, territory, Jerusalem. But Elder Holland here does say that Jerusalem is for the Jews, right? And again, he wouldn't go as far as to say that Arabs shouldn't be there or anything about the Dome of the Rock or anything like that. But it's interesting that he says that. And then he talks about how Orson Hyde comes, and then after that, about 50 years later, you have Theodore Herzl. And he was one of the main players when it came to returning to Israel. Theodore Herzl was an Austro-Hungarian Jewish journalist, playwright, political activist, and writer who was the father of modern political Zionism. Okay, this is him right here. This is him right here. Okay. So 50 years between him and Orson Hyde. All right. This is too brief an account to do justice to such a magnificent story, but I hope it explains something of the brotherhood we feel for you in our doctrinal devotion to the history, anguish, blessings, and future destiny of the tribes of Israel generally, and the Jewish people specifically. Okay. Perhaps it is appropriate to close this inadequate summary with the words of the prophet Zechariah. And remember, Zechariah, he's the one that talks about the second coming and the Jews recognizing Christ when he comes to the Mount of Olives. But anyway, sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, I am come, and I dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord. And many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, and thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto thee. And the Lord shall inherit Judah, his portion in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. We believe the work of modern Elder Orson Hyde has played a key role in God choosing Jerusalem again in the fullness of times. We pray for the preservation of the Jewish people and for their peaceful association with all who dwell in what is truly the Holy Land. So it's interesting. And then on that same occasion where he spoke, it says here, Latter-day Saint and Jewish delegation gathers in historic Jerusalem site. And there's a few things here. A delegation of Latter-day Saint leaders and Jewish dignitaries from the United States gathered at a historic site in Jerusalem to mark the 175th anniversary of an early apostles' journey to Jerusalem. Quote, Orson Hyde's 1841 mission to Jerusalem to dedicate this land for the return of the Jews and for Jerusalem to be its capital city was an important moment in the latter-day Jewish return to their homeland. We believe the work of Elder Orson Hyde has played a key role in God choosing Jerusalem again. Said Elder Jeffrey R. Holland, a member of the church's Quorum of the 12 Apostles, speaking at a commemoration event at the BYU Jerusalem Center for Near Eastern Studies, Thursday, October 27th, 2016. And during this event, look, in the background, look at this picture right here, right? There he is. There's Theodore Herzl. All right, and on top of that, so here you have Elder Holland, and then you have Elder Cook. So these are the two apostles that are there. They're meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. You see Joseph Lieberman right here. Here's Robert Adams, which was recently given an award by the church. They gave him the Thomas Kane Award for being a friend to the church. He's done a lot to help build bridges between our church and the Jewish community. Here's the Thomas Kane Award right here. And you have Elder Cook and Elder Holland on this occasion. This was just recently, June of this year, but this right here was in 2016. Okay. So, excuse me. So here's some pictures. So there's Benjamin Netanyahu. I think that this here is in the like the city hall of Jerusalem. It says a distinguished gathering of Mormon and Jewish leaders visits the mayor of Jerusalem, Mayor Nir Barkat. Okay, here they are in the memorial garden, commemorating what happened there. Looks like they gifted Robert Abrams. This picture right here. Maybe it's a little bit different. I don't know. I can't tell. Anyway, let's look at a few more. Joseph Lieberman. This is Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik. Here they are in that really pretty auditorium. Here's L. Tom Perry. He's passed away. He was an apostle. There he is again. Okay, so you get the idea. The delegation included former New York Attorney General Robert Adams, former U.S. Senator Joseph Lieberman from Connecticut, Rabbi Michael Miller, Executive Vice President and CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, Marlene Post, former U.S. National President of Hadassah, Rabbi Joseph Podesnik, Executive Vice President of the New York Board of Rabbis, and Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik of Congregation Sherith Israel in New York City, and Director of the Strauss Center for Torah and Western Thought of Yeshiva University. Quote, "There's nothing more noble than extending the hand of friendship to fellow human beings. The world needs more understanding and respect among people, and it is encouraging to see the fostering of that core value here today," said Abrams, who has been involved in cultivating a stronger relationship between Latter-day Saint and Jewish communities for many years. Quote, over the years we have toured the facilities of the church and discussed various topics in meetings with church leaders, including Elder Holland and Elder Cook, aimed at creating greater bonds of friendship and understanding, said Abrams during the Jerusalem visit. These events enabled me to learn more about the Latter-day Saint community and to discover that there are strong areas of common ground with the Jewish community. Okay, now this is Elder Cook. Elder Cook says, the genesis for this event was the extraordinary relationship and friendship that grew out of the collaborative efforts to better get to know each other and our traditions that were important to both Jews and Latter-day Saints. Interestingly, in the United States, we each have a population of 6 to 7 million. That is interesting. In the United States and Israel has between 6 and 7 million Jews. The United States has between 6 and 7 million members of the church. Yeah, you have to wonder about that, don't you? Because these are the two world capitals. One will be in Independence, Missouri, the New Jerusalem. The other one is the Old Jerusalem. And it just so happens that both of these countries have about the same population. And there's a lot, and many Israelis speak English. We've talked about that before, the significance that there's so many that speak English. And then not only that, but about half of all Jews live in the United States. So you have to wonder about that, seriously. Okay, the center of Jewish influence is New York City and the East Coast. The center of Latter-day Saint influence is Utah and the surrounding states, or the West Coast, explained the apostle. The Jewish delegation is composed of exceptional individuals and is a remarkable representation of the mainstreams of Judaism. It also includes major Jewish organizations. We express particular appreciation to Robert Abrams, who has been the primary impetus in developing this relationship. While in Jerusalem, the delegation met with top government leaders, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat. Okay, so this is maybe my longest video I've ever done. There's a lot to talk about. So just to wrap it up, okay, the church has had great interest in Israel since the beginning. It's because of our theology, and it's not just the way that other Christians view it, how it's like, oh, okay, Christ came and now the covenant's gone to all the nations. No, Israel and the Jews specifically still play a very key part, and they still have that covenant promise, and the Lord has not forgotten them. We know that in the millennium, we'll be joined together, that what was a single nation before it was divided will be restored. Okay, although not all in the land of Israel, we have the New Jerusalem, but Israel will be restored. All the tribes will be restored. And anyway, it's incredible to see all these things playing out. All right, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.